Hi, welcome to the Dr. Jimbo Love Show. I'm here with Seth Matthew. And again, I want to apologize for last week. We weren't able to do the broadcast. I was in with a medical procedure. We got some great games already kicked off today. Michigan State, Ohio State. It looks like Ohio State, as Seth was predicting earlier, is out to a very big start, 14-zip. We've also got OU playing Iowa State, and that game's tied up at 7-7. What do you think about that game? What are your feelings a little bit about OU, since you're a huge OU fan?
Well, right now, OU should be angry. They dropped farther than I ever expected in the rankings. They've kind of been disrespected all year by the ranking committee. They had a tough loss last week. I expect them to get this handled. By the second half, they'll pull away from Iowa State and be ready for their next game.
Good. We're going to have a segment all about that, too, and we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. Clemson is also playing against Wake Forest, and then they're up 10-0 right now in the first quarter.
Yeah, but don't count them out yet. You look at all the Wake Forest games. If there isn't 50, Wake Forest wasn't in that game. It's usually going to be 50-60 in all their games. It is crazy.
Yep, they are up and down, up and down. So one of the other things, too, we kind of were talking a little bit about the rankings that Seth brought up. You've got Georgia sitting on top at 10-0, Alabama 9-1. Oregon has a test today, and we'll talk a little bit more about Oregon against Utah, in Utah. They are at 9-1. Of course, you know that they beat Ohio State, who's sitting at number 4. Cincinnati knocking on the door at 5. They moved up from 6 from last week. And then you've got the two Michigan teams at 6 and 7. Michigan, University of Michigan, and then Michigan State, 9-1. Notre Dame still hanging around at 8. 9-1 there. Oklahoma State, which is playing against OU right now, is 9-1.
Is Notre Dame in a conference yet?
Notre Dame is not. They're still an independent.
That's a huge thing right now. With that top 10 going and Notre Dame sitting outside the top 4, all those teams get another game that Notre Dame doesn't. That could shift the rankings.
Absolutely.
And it's going to be a big question coming in with this Ohio State game. They lost to Oregon. How much do you value that at the beginning of the season if they crush Michigan State, who's in the top 10?
Good point, Seth. Very good point. And then the top 10 is closed out by Wake Forest, which right now is down 10-0 to Clemson. Could be an interesting. They're playing in Death Valley and Clemson. OU, again, we talk about OU, and I have them at 13. Is that pretty much the college football poll?
Yeah, that's where they're keeping them.
9-1, and they're at 13, which...
I don't really agree with it. I mean, I get they lost. They've been top 4. They were ranked top 2 before this new poll came out. They were sitting in the top 4 all season. And then when the new poll came out week 8, all of a sudden they're sitting at like 8 or 9.
Oh, they dropped like ridiculous amounts. And just for no reason other than just playing teams a little bit closer than some of their other counterparts. We've got the beginning of the 3-loss teams, Wisconsin at 15, and then Texas A&M also has 3 losses, and they're sitting at 16.
Which Wisconsin's sitting right now only has about, I believe there's only 2 weeks left in the Big Ten before they go to the Big Ten championship, and they will represent that side after beating Iowa. They should beat Minnesota coming up here in a couple weeks. I believe that's one of the final games they have. And so it's going to be Wisconsin versus either Michigan State, or Ohio State. And if Wisconsin wins that Big Ten championship game, there will be no Big Ten team in the top 4.
Yeah, isn't that amazing how they can get completely shut out? And you have all these teams that are just one-loss teams right now. They kind of beat themselves up and get themselves knocked out of the top 4. Again, Seth and I have talked about that. We're looking forward to when they expand the 4 to maybe 8 or 12 or however they're going to do it. But they need to do something just so that it makes it a little bit easier for some of these non-Power 5 teams.
Well, I think it'll make it less controversial because we keep waiting for the end of the year here where Georgia is most likely going to run into Alabama. Now, if Alabama loses by a field goal against the number 1 team in the country, how far do you drop them? Are they 5? Do they stay at 4? We just don't know yet. And if they beat Georgia by maybe 14 points, does Georgia stay in the top 4 even though they were undefeated all year?
Yeah, exactly. Well, this moves us into the first of our featured games today, and we mentioned it a little bit earlier. Ohio State is playing number 7 Michigan State. Ohio State, has the 3, and they featured it today on College Game Day, the 3 receiver cores, probably the best in the nation. C.J. Stroud is just tough. I mean, he can clinch the Heisman this week if he does well. But also don't take anything away from Michigan State. They have a nice running back, Walker III, who also is in the Heisman contention, and he's looking to have a big game today.
Well, Ohio State has depth. C.J. Stroud wasn't really supposed to start this year, but he came in and he's amazing. He kind of won that starting job where it was a competition, so his backup's more than capable. They didn't really lose too many significant players last year after being in the championship against Alabama. And we have a potential of an Alabama-Ohio State matchup again. Right now, Michigan State, they were impressive in that Michigan win, but then they laid an egg against Purdue. Now you're going to Ohio State, one of the toughest stadiums to play at. I just don't see Michigan State getting out of this one.
Yeah, it's going to be. I have Ohio State with this one as well. The next game, of course, is Seth's Oklahoma University versus Iowa State. Iowa State, as Seth was mentioning to me before the show, seems to be their kryptonite. They've lost to them the last 2 years, and you know how good a team Oklahoma has had. And for some reason, it seems that Ohio State has their number. It's a tie game right now.
Mm-hmm. And well, in this Iowa State team, they're not bad. They may be unranked. Their record doesn't show it, but they just haven't showed up when games count. They go up and they beat an Oklahoma State and get into that top 10, and then you lose to an unranked West Virginia. It just doesn't make sense. I don't know if it's coaching motivation. They'll be ready for this game, but Oklahoma should have some fire today. Lincoln Riley made some questionable decisions in that Baylor loss. He benched Caleb Williams, put in Radler. It was disastrous. He put back in Caleb Williams. And so I think right now Lincoln Riley's angry. He's angry about the way the Baylor game ended because time was expired and they still kicked a field goal. Apparently it was justified because of a point differential when it comes to rankings at the end of the season. So that way Baylor has a better chance to play Oklahoma in the final. But I think Oklahoma comes out, even though it's 7-7 right now, pulls away second half, and they win by at least 2 to 3 touchdowns.
And that's me too. I think Oklahoma will pull it out here at the end. They're just too much firepower, and they're playing for too much right now. Remember, next weekend is Bedlam, so Oklahoma gets to face Oklahoma State, which is just a huge rivalry game.
Which is a lot of risk if Oklahoma State wins this week, and Oklahoma loses this week and maybe next week. Oklahoma, for the first time since I can remember, isn't in that championship game.
Yeah, and it has been a long time since Oklahoma's had to sit that one out. The next game, we're looking at number 21 Arkansas versus Alabama. And again, Alabama is so tough. You get to, Saban just has his kids ready to play. If in the event that maybe something happens that they aren't ready, or they're looking through and thinking about next week's game in the Iron Bowl against Auburn, you know, Arkansas may have a chance. Mm-hmm. What do you think about this?
So Arkansas, I looked at their schedule. I mean, their record doesn't show how good of a football team they are. They have played multiple ranked teams. They pulled out some wins against Mississippi State and Texas A&M, but they've also been crushed by Georgia. And they've also lost to Ole Miss in that thriller of a game where Arkansas went for 2 to try to win it. So over half their season's been top 25 teams. So this team is used to this kind of pressure.
It is.
But Alabama, Nick Saban, they're gearing up to make that college football championship run. I see them blowing out Arkansas just like Georgia did, and Alabama possibly can move up even more. And they're already number 2.
They're number 2. Yeah,
so they'll stay at number 2.
Yeah, and we've got the Iron Bowl. We have a lot of rivalry games next weekend. It's going to be a really good weekend to talk football. So make sure you tune in with us next Saturday at 10 o'clock.
Favorite week of the year before it goes to the championship
Absolutely.
games. It's just amazing.
Oregon versus Utah. Now, this is an interesting game because nobody wants to go into Utah to play Utah right now. They're playing at such a high level. They're ranked 24th, but Vegas has them as a 3-point favorite. So go figure on that one. Oregon, again, they've been trudging along, and they beat Ohio State. They're sitting at number 3 right now. Mm-hmm. And they're very similar teams. Both teams really like to run the ball, so look to see them try to just do a nice old-fashioned, 3 downs and a cloud of dust. And what have you got for these guys?
So there's going to be a lot of emotion in this game. Utah's actually playing for something a little more, not for a college championship, but their coach, Whittingham, if they win this game, he's the most winningest coach that's ever been at Utah.
Oh, no kidding.
So he'll be
that's
141 and 59, I believe is what he's sitting at right now. So he's looking for 142. That record stood since like the 1940s or 50s. Going on that though, Travis Dye, he's a junior at Oregon running back. Like he said, there's going to be a lot of running. I could see this being a 30 to 40 type of game. But if he gets 92 yards, he's at his first career 1,000-yard rushing season. So I look for Oregon to rely heavy on him, and I give the edge to Oregon in this one.
Yeah, this is my upset special. I'm picking Utah. And, again, like I said, Utah, no one wants to go to Utah to play. They've won 17 out of 18 games at that venue. Now, again, you can look at the questionable, which conference they're in and stuff like that, but still, that says a lot for Utah. Oklahoma State versus Texas Tech. Oklahoma State is coming in at number 9. They're 9-1 and playing against the 6-4 Texas Tech team. Texas Tech hot and cold. Wins versus Iowa State, but bad losses to Texas and OU. Oklahoma State needs to catch fire and to sustain this and to make sure that Texas Tech does not sneak up and get the upset here.
Well, and this is where I get confused on rankings. As much as we talk about how Oklahoma's had lackluster performances and they've won, Oklahoma State's right there. They didn't do as bad against Kansas. They destroyed Kansas. But a lot of their games, especially at the beginning of the year against these like Tulanes and like those types of teams, they were close. They were only within a touchdown.
Sure.
I look at this. Oklahoma State's defense has to step up. Texas Tech's only hope in this game is their wide receiver. He's going for about over 1,000 yards. And Oklahoma State, if they keep it with Jalen Warren for the running back, they'll control the tempo of the game. Hopefully no turnovers, and they should walk away with the win here. And that wide receiver on Texas Tech is Eric Akasuna.
That's a mouthful.
That's why I skipped his name.
And then our last of the games that we want to feature is, again, close to my heart, University of South Carolina versus Auburn. South Carolina is 5-5. If they win here, they'll be bowl eligible. They're facing Clemson next week in a big rivalry, an interstate battle.
Maybe play Minnesota in a bowl game.
Who knows? I'm telling you. And then you have Auburn, of course, is a 7.5 point favorite. They're 6-4. Auburn can overwhelm South Carolina. The Cox will have to make Auburn try to beat them through the air. We'll see what happens. Again, very, very pivotal games for both teams. They're going to be playing interstate rivals next week. The Iron Bowl for Auburn playing against Alabama, and of course South Carolina is going to be playing their much-hated Clemson.
So this game's intriguing. I might give you a surprise pick here, but Bo Nix, me and him have gone back and forth. Every time I pick him, he loses. Every time I don't pick him, he wins. But it doesn't look like a factor this week. He was injured last week, and they had to put in a backup quarterback who played phenomenal. Don't get me wrong, he threw for over 300 yards. I believe he was like 25 out of 33 completions. So he's a capable backup. I don't know if he's going to play this game or not. But the big thing here is Mike Bobo. He actually was the interim head coach of South Carolina.
Of course, we know he was here in Fort Collins. He was a CSU coach for a number of years.
And when it came to the end of the year, Auburn offered him the offensive coordinator job. So this will be his first time returning to play the Gamecocks. And you know what? South Carolina's familiar with him. Really, there's not an injury bug in South Carolina. It's just, are they going to show up? Exactly. And you know what? I think senior-old coach brings a little fire into you. So I'm going to go with South Carolina this week.
Good. And I, of course, am not going to pick against my Gamecocks. Mike Bobo, interestingly, when I was in graduate school, he was the quarterback for Georgia. So Bobo is very, very familiar with South Carolina, and he won't have too much trouble being at home in Columbia. Let's talk a little bit about Brothers. And we're at Brothers Bar and Grill here at the shops of Northfield. I'm looking straight over my shoulder or my head here at the outdoor world. So if you're coming up I-70, if you're going west, all you need to do is just get off at the Quebec exit, come on in and see us. Tell us a little bit about what's going on in Brothers this week, Seth.
Yeah, so right now we are just being booked like crazy for people's holiday parties. If you come into the store, you'll see an upstairs mezz that seats about 50 to 60 people. We'll host your private event. If you have more than that, we always make accommodations. We have a great large party menu, so it's no work on you, just a bill at the end. And yeah, it's a great place to watch college football and all your sports. Now, we'll take a little thing outside of Brothers. We are closed on Thanksgiving, but if you're looking for something to do, let's say you don't have family in town and you're looking for something for you and the girlfriend or just you and a buddy to do, the Rapids are #1 in the MLS. They will be hosting the second round playoff game on Thanksgiving. And some of the events they have over there is they're going to have a Jumbo TV, so you can watch the football games that they have on Thanksgiving. And then for $30, you'll get a ticket to go into the stadium and watch the MLS playoff game where the Rapids has finally returned to the top of the division.
Wow, and that's really close. It's probably, about a half mile, maybe mile away from here.
Yeah, and if it's a little cold, obviously you can't stop it on that, but have a couple beers before you walk over there, and it is a beautiful walk. You walk through some amazing neighborhoods, a park, and then you just see this great, amazing stadium. There's not a bad seat in the house at that stadium.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right, so we're going to keep going right away. We'll just parlay right into the NFL games, and we feature a number of NFL games. And what we'll do is we'll talk about the first one, which is close to Seth's heart, is his Vikings versus the Packers. The Vikings come in 4-5 versus the 8-2 Packers. With Aaron Rodgers is back after his COVID protocols. What do you got for this as far as your Vikings?
So this doesn't really have a huge implication of the Vikings taking over the division, but it will create some ground where they'll make it a little bit closer. Now, Aaron Rodgers has only lost once this year. That second loss was made with Jordan Love. The Packers are looking good. The Vikings, though, have been in every single game, usually leading every game by halftime. They need to figure out how to close it out. They have let so many teams back in. They've lost so many times by one field goal. They beat the Chargers last week by a touchdown, but they were also up by 14 points. They were even up on Baltimore before Baltimore came back and upset them as well. So I'm thinking that the Vikings, there's going to be a lot of fire in this team. It is in their home stadium. This is the rival. It is state lines, and the Vikings are going to pull this one off.
Oh, boy. Yep, I remember when I was in Minneapolis. I was there for work back in 2006 for about 6 months. And you pretty much can't wear any Packer stuff in Minneapolis.
And Minnesota people travel, too. Don't get me wrong. I was in Kansas City for a wedding a couple months ago, and I went to a Kansas City bar. Everything was Arrowhead. And I walk in, it was half Vikings fans, half Kansas City. They weren't even playing each other. But every bar I go into, the Vikings have a presence.
Very good, very good. Our second game that we're featuring is the Colts. They're 5-5 versus the 6-3 Bills. Colts, very, very beatable secondary. We'll have to wait and see if Josh Allen is able to take advantage of that. Big game for the Bills with the Pats surging. The Bills really need to make sure they win this one if they want to keep in control of the AFC.
And those Patriots, they look good. Mac Jones is really getting into his own.
Yeah, he sure is. He's so accurate.
Yeah, but going to this game, it is a tale of two different teams. The Bills came in, honestly, my Super Bowl favorite at the beginning of the year. Colts, I really didn't know what I was going to get out of them, but they are surging. After struggling early in the season, they've now won 3 out of their last 4. The Bills have been struggling with teams, losing to Jacksonville, which I'm just shocked.
I know.
And then they just had a big win against the Jets and blew them out by 40, but then again, who doesn't? But then the Colts, with Derrick Henry going down, have the number 1 running back in the NFL. That's the active running back, Jonathan Taylor. They are only getting better, but still going with the Bills. They was my early pick. I still think Stephon Diggs has a lot to give. And Josh Allen, I'm just never counting this guy out. He's amazing to watch. He's one of my favorite quarterbacks to actually see play the game.
Yeah, and we want to definitely bring to mind that he just played up the road in Laramie for the Wyoming Cowboys. This third game is the Cardinals, which are 8-2, versus the Seahawks. So they call this the Battle of the Birds, the Revenge of the Birds.
And they've had some amazing games in this past.
Absolutely. So, look, the Cardinals have a good D, a good run. The run defense is a little questionable. Look for Wilson. Now, Wilson last week looked as though he was still a little injured. He was only 20 for 40, and he threw 2 interceptions, which is very uncharacteristic. Now, it could be the rust, or it could be the finger is still bothering him. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, and I don't know if they rushed him back or not, but you're looking at a team that if he doesn't come back sooner than later, this team's going to be out of playoffs, and there's no point of him playing.
Right.
Unfortunately, he took another loss this week with Chris Carson's just announced season-ending neck surgery, which leaves Alex Collins in the backfield. And if anyone knows Alex Collins, he's not really a starter. He is a decent running back, but he's usually the 2-punch on a 1-2 punch. So now there's a lot of pressure on him. You still got DK Metcalf. You still have Tyler Lockett. The Cardinals are going to be without DeAndre Hopkins. He's still dealing with a thigh injury. And I mean, if you remember their last year's game, it was a Hail Mary Kyler Murray threw. DeAndre Hopkins jumped over 3 defenders, caught it, and got a touchdown.
Yeah.
So you won't have him, but they have the addition of Zach Ertz, and they also have Kirk, and they still have a lot of Rondale Moore. They have a solid offense. And if Kyler Murray's healthy and there is any injury to Russell Wilson right now, I give the edge to Arizona.
I do too. I'm pulling for the Arizona, and I'm also going with the Bills from the last game we spoke about. Next one is going to be real interesting. It's the Cowboys versus the Chiefs. Now the Chiefs have had 3 consecutive wins. Is Patrick Mahomes back? Are they now back on track to be the team that everyone thought the Chiefs would be earlier in the season? Cowboys have Cooper is out due to COVID, so that's going to hurt the Cowboys' deep threat. The over and under is 56.5. I tend to think that I think that these two teams are going to combine for more than 56.5. So you might want to consider that.
Yeah, I think you're looking at over 60. I could even see a 70-point game here.
Mm-hmm.
You're running into 2 high-powered offense. Now, I'm not a believer in the Cowboys. You have a great record this year, but you are the most underperforming team I've ever seen on paper. You're a lot like my Minnesota Timberwolves. I read their roster and I think they're great, and I look at their record, it doesn't add up. And so Kansas City Chiefs are figuring it out. Patrick Mahomes, you can't count him out. We've all been talking about it. We've all been waiting. I think he wins this week over the Cowboys. You got Zeke, you got Dak, you got CeeDee Lamb still. But on the other side, you still have Kelsey, you have Tyreek Hill, Mahomes. And where were they last year? The Super Bowl.
The last 2 years.
The last 2 years. And so with this league, especially their division where everybody's close, I think that we start seeing the Chiefs pull away this week, and they're going to win this division.
Yeah, I think so too. I've just been kind of waiting for them to get going. Well, they've got three consecutive wins here. Let's see if they can make it a 4th this week. Washington versus Carolina. You've got 3-6 Washington, 5-5 Carolina. The story of this game is Cam Newton. He was cut by the Patriots, and he's back in his home stadium playing a pretty good ball game. I mean, where the way that Cam goes is the way that the Panthers seem to be going. Now, McCaffrey's back, his injury for his hamstring. He's back in. He played last week, and they were making fun of him doing some kind of touchdown dance. I guess we know that Christian McCaffrey cannot dance.
Yeah, and the bigger story, too, is the head coach of Washington. That's Ron Rivera. That's the guy that Cam Newton spent most of his career with. But Cam Newton came in last week, only played a couple snaps, but he came away with 2 touchdowns. I believe one was rushing, one was throwing. And now that McCaffrey's healthy, you add that with a mobile Cam Newton, Carolina can start surging back to the top. I think this is a great opportunity because, honestly, I did not know if I'd see Cam Newton in the NFL again.
I didn't think we would.
But I can see him making a statement here, and I can see an extension or a re-signing of Cam Newton at the end of this year. And they didn't get him cheap. So they believe in him. I believe it was somewhere around like $10 million to sign a quarterback for half a season. And you look at the last couple games. I mean, you had the statement game of Carolina with Cam Newton back winning, but Washington upset Tampa Bay. Now, I'm going to call that a fluke, and I'm going to give this to Carolina. Cam Newton's return. Ron Rivera is going to pull out all the tricks because he's familiar with them. But I think Cam Newton with Christian McCaffrey is a deadly duo. I do too, and it's going to be great. Christian McCaffrey played his high school ball just down the street from us here at Valor Christian High School. His father, of course, was a standout for the Broncos and the Giants. He won Super Bowls at both places. And, of course, his mother was a great volleyball player for Stanford. So he's got just incredible genes. And I've actually, his grandfather was in the 1960 Olympics in Rome. So obviously you've got just incredible athletes. And don't forget their sauce line. Go to King Supers. You can get a bottle of McCaffrey barbecue sauce.
Exactly. I used to eat Eddie's mustard there that he had there for a while. It was pretty good mustard. So, and our last game we're going to feature is, of course, the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're 5-3-1. Just laid an egg last weekend and got lucky. Actually, I think they got really lucky to tie Detroit. They played horrible. Of course, Ben was COVID ineligible very, very late in the week. So Mason Rudolph did not get a chance to do his snaps, and it showed. Mm-hmm. He looked absolutely like a nightmare.
How do you feel as him as a backup? Do you think that his career is kind of trending downward and they're going to draft a new guy?
I think so, and I would really like to see him do that because I don't see him. You know, he doesn't have the continuity, and by now you would have seen that. But he looked so poor last week. It just scares the hell out of me if Ben never goes down in any one of these playoff runs. Chargers, of course, Herbert is tough. You know, we've talked about his accuracy. Seth, what have you got for this game?
Well, is this his second year?
Herbert is in his second or third year. I can't remember.
And so here's where I'm going with this is he had an amazing season last year. Obviously, they didn't make playoffs, but they were a solid team, up and up. Herbert's the man, and they were doing some amazing things. But this year, they started out hot. They took the top of the division. It looked like they were going to run away with it, but they're falling apart.
Yeah.
People are figuring out Herbert. They're figuring out Austin Eckler. Pittsburgh defense is pretty solid. Najee, they're going to have to rely on Najee Harris a lot this game.
Yes.
But they have something that the Chargers don't, is Najee Harris can either catch the ball like Eckler, or he can run between the tackles. And I don't know if you've ever seen Eckler run between the tackles, but he does not go far.
Right.
So I'm going to give the edge to the Steelers in this one. I think their defense is going to pull it together. Hopefully, with Big Ben there, they won't lay an egg like they did last week, because that 18-18 or whatever that ended up with the Lions was.
Yeah, well, you look for Tomlin. He's going to be, he's definitely going to be on him. He's been on him all week, according to what I've been reading and stuff like that. The thing about Herbert is if you watch the baseball, a pitcher, until people figure him out, no one can hit him. But once they figure out how to hit him or what his tendencies are, a lot of times you see these pitchers have really tough sophomore seasons.
Well, and he's lucky that Mahomes has struggled at the beginning of this year, because a lot of people have been focusing on Mahomes with so many interceptions. But, I mean, before this season, we were talking about how Herbert and Mahomes are going to have great battles, and that Herbert's going to be slinging it like Mahomes did when led him to the Super Bowl. And right now, it just doesn't look like it.
Nope, not at all. But I'm going to pick my Steelers, of course. They're playing in California, so they'll be away from the friendly confines of Heinz Field. Again, we're here at Brothers Bar and Grill here at the shops at Northfield. We want to invite you to come down this afternoon. Seth, the general manager here, he will put on any game that you would want to watch. It's really hard to sit anywhere in this restaurant without being able to see at least 3 or 4 TVs. Mm-hmm. So there'll be multiple games to watch. Next week we'll be again back at 10 o'clock on Saturday. We'll be talking about a lot of rivalry games, so get yourself set, folks. And again, we'd love to see you down here. And in the meantime, thank you very much for tuning in to us, and we will talk to you next week.
See you later, everybody.